What I saw that night changed everything I thought I knew about myself, about the women around me, and about the dangerous games we play when we think no one is watching. If you're over 45, if you've ever felt like you're living a double life, or if you've ever wondered how some women seem to lose everything overnight, you need to hear this story. Because what happened to me in that nightclub wasn't just a delivery gone wrong. It was a mirror reflecting the darkest secrets that too many of us are hiding, and the terrifying realization that we're all just one decision away from falling into the same trap. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone before, something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. Last month, I had to make what I thought was a simple delivery to a nightclub downtown. I run a small catering business, and occasionally I get last-minute orders for events. This seemed routine, fancy hors d'oeuvres for a private party. But when I walked through those doors at 11 p.m., I didn't just deliver food. I delivered myself into a world where I witnessed something that completely shattered my understanding of how women my age, successful, intelligent, accomplished women, can slowly destroy their lives without even realizing it's happening. The club was called Velvet Nights, and from the outside, it looked elegant, sophisticated. Red velvet ropes, doormen in expensive suits, valets parking luxury cars. The kind of place where you'd expect to find business executives unwinding after a long week. But as I walked through the main entrance with my delivery cart, something felt off. The music was too loud, the lights were too dim, and there was this energy in the air. Desperate, hungry, almost predatory. The hostess who met me was probably in her early 50s, impeccably dressed, but her eyes had this hollow look that I recognized but couldn't quite place at first. She led me through the main dining area, past groups of well-dressed women laughing too loudly, drinking too fast, their designer handbags clutched too tightly. These weren't young party girls. These were women like me, middle-aged, presumably successful, the kind of women you'd see at PTA meetings or charity galas. But there was something different about them here, something raw and unguarded that made my stomach turn. As we walked deeper into the club, I started noticing things that didn't add up. The way some women would disappear into private rooms with men they just met. The way others sat alone at the bar, staring at their phones with expressions of pure desperation. The way the staff moved around them, not with respect, but with the calculated attention of predators circling wounded prey. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a nightclub. This was a hunting ground, and the prey were women exactly like me. The hostess brought me to a back room where the private party was being held, and what I saw there made my blood run cold. About 20 women, all between 45 and 60, all dressed to kill, all with that same desperate energy I'd sensed in the main area. But this wasn't a celebration. This was something much darker. As I set up the food, I overheard conversations that made me realize I was witnessing the slow-motion destruction of lives that had once been everything these women had worked for. I maxed out another credit card last week, one woman confided to her friend, her voice slurred from too much wine. But David doesn't check the statements anymore, so what he doesn't know won't hurt him. Another woman, probably a few years older than me, was showing off photos on her phone, not of her grandchildren, but of a man who was clearly decades younger. "He says he loves me," she whispered to anyone who would listen. "He just needs a little help with his rent this month. It's only $5,000. A third woman sat in the corner, her hands trembling as she scrolled through what looked like dating apps, her wedding ring still gleaming on her finger. I wanted to leave. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to grab my empty trays and get out of there as fast as possible. But I couldn't move. Because looking at these women was like looking into a funhouse mirror. I could see myself in every single one of them. The loneliness masked by expensive clothes. The desperation disguised as confidence. The way they were all searching for something, validation, excitement, purpose, in all the wrong places. That's when I realized the most terrifying truth of all. I wasn't there by accident. This wasn't just a random catering gig. Someone had specifically requested my services, someone who knew I fit the profile, someone who thought I might be ready to join their little club of women who had given up on their real lives and were now living in the shadow world of secrets and lies. As I packed up my equipment, trying to become invisible, I heard the hostess talking to one of the club managers. "She's perfect," she said, glancing in my direction. "Recent divorce, struggling business, kids out of the house. Give her a few weeks and she'll be back here as a customer, not a caterer." The manager nodded, making notes on his tablet. The lonely ones always come back. Especially the ones who think they're too smart to fall for it. I realized in that moment that I was looking at a systematic operation designed to prey on women exactly like me. Women who had reached a point in their lives where they felt invisible, unwanted, forgotten. Women who had sacrificed so much for their families and careers that they had lost touch with who they really were underneath all those roles. Women who were so hungry for attention, for excitement, for someone to make them feel alive again, that they were willing to risk everything. Their marriages, their savings, their reputations, their self-respect, for just a taste of what they thought they were missing. But here's what scared me most. As I listened to their stories, as I watched them make decisions that were clearly destroying their lives, I realized how easily I could have been one of them. How close I had come to making similar choices. How many nights I had sat alone in my empty house, scrolling through social media, wondering if this was all there was. How many times I had fantasized about throwing caution to the wind, about doing something wild and reckless, about finding someone who would make me feel young and desirable again. The drive home that night was the longest of my life. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. Not from fear, but from recognition. Because I had seen my future in that club, and it was terrifying. I had seen what happens to women like me when we let our pain and loneliness make our decisions for us. I had seen the endpoint of all those small compromises, all those little lies we tell ourselves, all those moments when we choose temporary validation over long-term stability. But I also realized something else that night, something that saved my life and could save yours too. Those women didn't start out as desperate gamblers and serial daters and secret spenders. They started out as women with legitimate needs. The need to feel valued, to feel attractive, to feel like their lives still had meaning and excitement. The tragedy wasn't that they had these needs. The tragedy was that they were trying to meet those needs in ways that only made them feel worse, that only deepened their sense of emptiness and desperation. Over the next several weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had witnessed. I started researching, talking to counselors, reading everything I could find about women in midlife crisis, about addiction, about the psychology of self-destructive behavior. And what I learned changed my entire perspective on what it means to navigate this phase of life as a woman. First, I learned that what I saw at that club wasn't unusual. There's an entire industry built on exploiting the vulnerabilities of middle-aged women. Dating apps that specifically target lonely divorcees. Investment schemes that prey on women who have recently come into money from divorce settlements or inheritances. Shopping platforms that encourage compulsive spending as a form of self-care. Wellness programs that promise to restore youth and vitality for just a few $1,000s. These aren't random scams. They're carefully designed systems that understand exactly what we're missing and exactly how to exploit those gaps. But more importantly, I learned that there are ways to meet our legitimate needs without falling into these traps. Ways to reclaim our sense of power and purpose and excitement without risking everything we've worked for. Ways to feel alive and valuable again without compromising our integrity or our security. The first thing I had to understand was that the feelings driving those women in the club, the loneliness, the sense of invisibility, the hunger for validation, these aren't character flaws. They're normal responses to very real losses that happen as we age. We lose our roles as active mothers. We lose our youthful appearance. We lose relationships through death and divorce. We lose our sense of being needed, of being central to other people's lives. These losses are real, and they hurt, and pretending they don't exist only makes us more vulnerable to the kind of predators I encountered that night. But acknowledging these losses doesn't mean we have to fill the void with destructive behaviors. It means we have to be smarter about how we rebuild our sense of self and purpose. It means we have to be more intentional about creating genuine connections and meaningful activities. It means we have to learn to distinguish between our real needs and the artificial needs that others try to create in us. Here's what I wish I could have told those women in the club, what I wish someone had told me before I got so close to making similar mistakes. When you feel that desperate hunger for something, attention, excitement, validation, purpose, stop and ask yourself, what am I really missing? Not what do I think I want in this moment, but what fundamental need am I trying to meet? Are you missing intellectual stimulation, physical affection, creative expression, social connection, a sense of contributing to something important, adventure and new experiences? Once you identify the real need, you can start looking for healthy ways to meet it. If you're missing intellectual stimulation, that might mean taking a class or joining a book club, not getting involved with someone who love bombs you with complicated psychological games. If you're missing physical affection, that might mean getting regular massages or taking dance classes, not rushing into relationships with people who don't respect your boundaries. If you're missing a sense of purpose, that might mean volunteering for causes you care about or starting a passion project, not spending money you don't have on things that promise to make you feel important. The second thing I learned is that we have to become experts at recognizing manipulation. The people who run places like that nightclub, who create apps designed to exploit our vulnerabilities, who sell us products and services and relationships that promise to fix everything that's wrong with our lives, they're not amateurs. They study us. They know exactly what we're missing, exactly what we're afraid of, exactly what promises will make us abandon our better judgment. They know we're afraid of being alone, so they create artificial urgency around relationships. They know we're worried about aging, so they sell us expensive treatments that promise to turn back time. They know we feel invisible, so they design experiences that make us feel like VIPs, at least until the bill comes due. They know we're questioning our worth, so they offer us scenarios where we can feel powerful and desirable, even if those scenarios are ultimately degrading. Learning to recognize these tactics isn't about becoming cynical or paranoid. It's about developing the same kind of healthy skepticism that protects us from any other kind of predator. When someone or something promises to solve all your problems quickly and easily, that's a red flag. When someone pressures you to make immediate decisions without giving you time to think, that's a red flag. When someone tells you that you're special and different from other women, but then treats you exactly like they treat everyone else, that's a red flag. The third thing I learned, and this might be the most important, is that we have to take responsibility for our own emotional regulation. Those women in the club weren't just victims of external manipulation. They were also victims of their own unprocessed emotions and unmet needs. They had never learned healthy ways to cope with disappointment, loneliness, anxiety, or boredom. So when those feelings became overwhelming, they reached for whatever quick fix was available, regardless of the long-term consequences. This doesn't mean blaming ourselves for being human, for having needs and vulnerabilities. It means developing better tools for managing our emotional lives so that we don't make decisions from a place of desperation or pain. It means learning to sit with uncomfortable feelings without immediately trying to escape them. It means building support systems that can help us process difficult emotions before they drive us to destructive behaviors. For me, this meant finally going to therapy to deal with the grief and anger I had been carrying around since my divorce. It meant joining a support group for women navigating midlife transitions. It meant developing a regular meditation practice to help me distinguish between my thoughts and feelings and my actual circumstances. It meant learning to ask for help when I was struggling, instead of trying to handle everything alone until I reached a breaking point. The fourth thing I learned is that we have to be honest about our financial and emotional resources, and we have to protect them fiercely. Almost every woman in that club had compromised her financial security for temporary emotional satisfaction. They had spent money they didn't have, made investments based on promises rather than facts, or allowed other people to have access to their resources without appropriate safeguards. This isn't just about money, though money is a big part of it. It's about recognizing that our time, our energy, our attention, our trust, these are all precious resources that we can't afford to waste on people and activities that don't genuinely serve our best interests. It's about learning to say no to opportunities that seem exciting but don't align with our actual goals and values. It's about setting boundaries that protect our resources so we can use them to build the life we actually want, not just escape from the life we're tired of living. The fifth thing, and this was the hardest lesson for me to learn, is that we have to grieve the versions of ourselves that we're never going to be again. We're never going to be 25 again. We're never going to have the energy and optimism and endless possibilities that we had in our youth. We're never going to be the primary focus of our children's lives again. We're never going to be able to make certain choices or have certain experiences that require youth or different circumstances. But grieving these losses doesn't mean giving up on life. It means accepting reality so that we can focus our energy on what's still possible, on the opportunities and joys and connections that are available to us now, at this stage of our lives. It means learning to value wisdom over beauty, depth over excitement, authenticity over performance. It means discovering the unique pleasures and possibilities that come with being a mature woman who knows herself and what she wants. The women in that club were stuck in a kind of suspended adolescence, trying to recreate experiences and feelings that belonged to a different phase of life. They were so focused on what they had lost that they couldn't see what they had gained, or what they could still build. They were trying to solve the problem of aging by pretending it wasn't happening, instead of embracing the power and freedom that can come with this phase of life. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying that women our age should accept boring, passionless lives. I'm not saying we should give up on romance or adventure or new experiences. I'm saying we need to pursue these things from a place of strength and self-knowledge, not from a place of desperation and self-deception. There's a huge difference between a woman who decides to start dating again because she's ready for companionship and partnership, and a woman who starts dating because she can't stand being alone with herself. There's a huge difference between a woman who takes up salsa dancing because she loves music and movement, and a woman who takes up salsa dancing because she's hoping to meet someone who will make her feel young again. There's a huge difference between a woman who splurges on a beautiful dress because she wants to feel confident and attractive, and a woman who maxes out her credit cards on clothes because she's trying to buy a different identity. The difference isn't in the activity itself. It's in the intention and the emotional state behind the choice. When we make decisions from a place of self-love and genuine desire, those decisions tend to enhance our lives and bring us closer to who we really are. When we make decisions from a place of fear and desperation, those decisions tend to take us further away from ourselves and create more problems than they solve. So how do we make sure we're operating from the right place? How do we distinguish between healthy desires and desperate attempts to escape our reality? First, we slow down. We give ourselves time to think before we act. We ask ourselves hard questions about what we're really trying to accomplish and whether our proposed solution actually addresses our real problem. Second, we get input from people who care about us and have our best interests at heart. We talk to friends who will tell us the truth, not just what we want to hear. We consult with professionals, therapists, financial advisors, attorneys, who can help us see the potential consequences of our choices. We don't make major decisions in isolation, especially when we're feeling vulnerable or desperate. Third, we pay attention to our bodies and our instincts. If something feels too good to be true, it probably is. If we feel pressured or rushed, we step back. If we find ourselves making excuses for behavior that we would criticize in other people, we stop and reassess. Our gut feelings aren't always right, but they're usually picking up on something important that our conscious minds haven't processed yet. Fourth, we ask ourselves whether our choices are taking us toward the person we want to be, or away from her. Are we becoming more authentic, more integrated, more at peace with ourselves? Or are we becoming more fragmented, more dependent on external validation, more disconnected from our own values and goals? The night I made that delivery changed my life, but not in the way anyone at that club intended. Instead of becoming another customer, another woman willing to trade her security and self-respect for temporary excitement, I became someone who understands the traps that are set for women like us, and more importantly, someone who knows how to avoid them. I learned that the antidote to loneliness isn't necessarily companionship, it's self-companionship. It's becoming someone you genuinely enjoy being with, someone whose thoughts and interests and dreams are compelling enough to sustain you even when you're alone. I learned that the antidote to feeling invisible isn't trying to become the center of attention. It's finding meaningful ways to contribute to the world, ways that matter regardless of whether anyone notices or applauds. I learned that the antidote to feeling powerless isn't finding someone else to take care of everything. It's developing your own capabilities and resources so that you can take care of yourself and the people you care about. I learned that the antidote to boredom isn't seeking more intense experiences. It's cultivating the ability to find depth and interest in ordinary life, in simple pleasures, in the process of growth and learning that can continue as long as we're alive. Most importantly, I learned that the women in that club weren't fundamentally different from me. They had just made different choices when faced with the same challenges and losses that we all face as we age. They had chosen escape over engagement, fantasy over reality, quick fixes over sustainable solutions. But those were choices, not inevitable outcomes. And that means we can make different choices. We can choose to face our losses with dignity and grace, to grieve what's gone while embracing what's still possible. We can choose to meet our needs in ways that honor our worth and protect our well-being. We can choose to surround ourselves with people who see our full humanity, not just our vulnerabilities. We can choose to invest our resources, our time, our money, our energy, our love, in people and activities that genuinely enrich our lives rather than just distract us from our problems. We can choose to become the kinds of women who don't need to hide in the shadows, who don't need to live double lives, who don't need to compromise our values or our security to feel alive and valuable. We can choose to become women who are fully integrated, fully authentic, fully present to our own lives. If you've been feeling lost or desperate or tempted by promises that seem too good to be true, please know that you have more options than you think you do. You don't have to choose between a boring, passionless existence and a reckless, destructive one. There's a third option, a life of genuine depth and meaning and satisfaction, built on a foundation of self-knowledge and self-respect. You deserve relationships that enhance your life without threatening your security. You deserve activities and interests that challenge and excite you without requiring you to betray your values. You deserve to feel beautiful and valuable and alive without having to prove it to people who don't have your best interests at heart. The women I met that night in the club had forgotten these truths, or maybe they had never learned them in the first place. But it's not too late for any of us to remember, to choose differently, to build lives that we don't need to escape from because they're already everything we need them to be. That's the real secret I learned that night. Not how to avoid the traps that are set for us, although that's important, but how to create lives that are so fulfilling and authentic that those traps lose their power to tempt us. When you know who you are and what you want, when you've built genuine sources of meaning and connection and joy, when you've learned to be your own best friend and strongest advocate, the desperate shortcuts start to look like what they really are, dead ends that lead away from everything you're actually trying to find. So if you've made it this far, if this story has resonated with you in any way, I want you to know that you're not alone in whatever you're facing. And more importantly, you're not powerless. You have choices, good choices, choices that can lead you toward the woman you're meant to become rather than away from her. But before I finish sharing this story with you, I need to tell you about something else I discovered in the weeks following that night. Something that made me realize the situation was even more dangerous than I had initially thought, and something that could help you recognize if you're already caught in the early stages of this kind of destructive pattern. 3 weeks after the delivery, I received a phone call that made my blood run cold. It was the hostess from the club, the one with the hollow eyes who had led me through that night of revelations. Her voice was smooth, friendly, almost maternal. "Hi, honey," she said, as if we were old friends. "I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the catering contact form. I just wanted to thank you for such professional service that night, and I was wondering if you might be interested in some additional opportunities." The hair on the back of my neck stood up immediately. This wasn't a business call about catering services. This was exactly what I had overheard that night, the systematic targeting of women who fit their profile. They had indeed identified me as a potential victim, and now they were moving to the next phase of their operation. "What kind of opportunities?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral while my mind raced. The hostess, who introduced herself as Patricia, explained that they were looking for sophisticated women to help with special events, women who could relate to their clientele and help newcomers feel comfortable. The pay was excellent, she said, much better than catering. And the work environment was so much more exciting than what I was probably used to. As she talked, I realized I was getting a masterclass in manipulation tactics. Every sentence was carefully designed to appeal to specific vulnerabilities that women my age commonly experience. She complimented my appearance and professionalism, making me feel special and chosen. She implied that my current work was beneath someone of my obvious capabilities. She suggested that I deserved more excitement and financial reward than I was currently getting. She created a sense of urgency by mentioning that they only selected a few women each month for these special positions. Most insidiously, she positioned this opportunity as something that would make me feel valued and important again. "Women like you," she said, "women with real-life experience and sophistication, you're exactly what our clients are looking for. You understand what it means to have class, to have standards. These younger girls, they just don't have that depth." If I hadn't witnessed what I had witnessed that night, if I hadn't spent the previous weeks researching and understanding these tactics, I might have been flattered. I might have been curious. I might have agreed to meet with her just to hear more about this mysterious opportunity that would make me feel special and appreciated again. Instead, I told her I wasn't interested and hung up. But the call haunted me for days, not because I was tempted, but because I realized how perfectly calibrated it had been to exploit the exact insecurities and desires that I had been struggling with since my divorce. They had read me like a book in the brief time I had spent in their establishment, and they had crafted their approach based on that assessment. This made me understand something crucial about how these predatory systems work. They don't rely on random chance or hope that desperate women will simply stumble through their doors. They actively recruit, they systematically identify and pursue women who show signs of vulnerability, and they use sophisticated psychological techniques to break down whatever resistance those women might initially have. I started researching further, and what I found was terrifying. There are entire networks of businesses, not just nightclubs, but dating services, investment groups, wellness centers, even some therapy practices, that specifically target middle-aged women going through transitions. Divorce, death of a spouse, children leaving home, job loss, health scares. These are all trigger events that make women vulnerable to the kind of exploitation I had witnessed. The operators of these schemes study us like scientists study lab rats. They know that women in their 40s and 50s often feel invisible in a culture that worships youth. They know we're likely to be dealing with hormonal changes that affect our mood and decision-making. They know we've probably sacrificed our own dreams and desires for decades in service of others, and that we're hungry to reclaim some sense of personal power and excitement. They know that many of us have recently come into money through divorce settlements or inheritance, but that we may lack experience managing large sums independently. Most importantly, they know that we've been socialized to be polite, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to avoid making scenes or seeming difficult. They exploit our own social conditioning against us, knowing that we're less likely than younger women to trust our instincts when something feels wrong, because we've been taught that being suspicious or confrontational is unfeminine and unattractive. But here's what they don't expect. They don't expect us to educate ourselves about their methods. They don't expect us to develop the kind of street smarts that can protect us from their sophisticated manipulation techniques. They certainly don't expect us to share information with each other about what we've learned. After Patricia's phone call, I made a decision that probably saved not just my life, but the lives of other women as well. I started documenting everything I could learn about these operations. I started reaching out to women who had been targeted, women who had fallen into these traps, women who had managed to escape. I started building a network of information and support that could help other women recognize and avoid these predators. What I learned from these conversations was both heartbreaking and empowering. The women who had been victimized weren't stupid or weak or fundamentally different from the rest of us. They were intelligent, accomplished women who had simply been caught at vulnerable moments by people who were experts at exploitation. But the women who had escaped, who had managed to recognize the manipulation before it was too late, they had developed specific skills and awareness that had protected them. They had learned to trust their instincts, even when those instincts seemed to contradict what other people were telling them. They had learned to slow down the decision-making process, to never commit to anything important in the moment, no matter how urgent it seemed. They had learned to verify information independently, to do their own research rather than relying on the promises and reassurances of people who stood to benefit from their choices. Most importantly, they had learned to distinguish between genuine opportunities for growth and connection, and artificial opportunities designed to exploit their vulnerabilities. They had developed what I started thinking of as predator radar, the ability to quickly identify when someone was trying to manipulate them rather than genuinely help them. This is the skill I most want to pass on to you, because it's the difference between thriving in this phase of your life and becoming another casualty of people who see your vulnerabilities as profit opportunities. Learning to recognize manipulation isn't about becoming paranoid or cynical. It's about becoming discerning. It's about developing the same kind of protective instincts that you would use to protect your children, but turning those instincts toward protecting yourself. Here's what genuine opportunities look like versus manipulative ones. Genuine opportunities give you time to think and research. Manipulative opportunities create artificial urgency and pressure you to decide immediately. Genuine opportunities encourage you to talk to other people and get outside opinions. Manipulative opportunities discourage you from involving others and suggest that this is something special just for you. Genuine opportunities are transparent about costs, risks, and realistic outcomes. Manipulative opportunities make grand promises while being vague about details, costs, or potential downsides. Genuine opportunities respect your boundaries and back off when you say no. Manipulative opportunities become more aggressive when you resist, using guilt, flattery, or implied threats to overcome your objections. Genuine opportunities align with your existing values and long-term goals. Manipulative opportunities require you to compromise your values or abandon your long-term security for short-term gratification. Genuine opportunities make you feel more like yourself. Manipulative opportunities require you to become someone different, someone who hides things from the people who care about you. The reason I'm sharing all of this detail with you is that knowledge is your best defense. The more you understand about how these systems work, the less likely you are to fall victim to them. But knowledge alone isn't enough. You also need to develop the emotional resilience and self-awareness that make you less vulnerable in the first place. This brings me back to the fundamental lesson of that night at the club. Those women weren't there because they were inherently self-destructive or morally weak. They were there because they had legitimate needs that weren't being met in healthy ways, and they had been systematically isolated from the support systems and information that could have protected them. The solution isn't to eliminate our needs or to become completely self-sufficient and isolated. The solution is to build authentic support networks, to develop healthy ways of meeting our needs, and to create lives that are so fulfilling and integrated that we don't need to escape from them. This means being intentional about building friendships with other women who are navigating similar challenges. It means finding mentors who have successfully navigated the transitions we're facing. It means working with professionals, therapists, financial advisors, career coaches, who can help us make good decisions during vulnerable periods. It means engaging in activities and communities that align with our values and give us a sense of purpose and belonging. Most importantly, it means learning to be honest with ourselves about our emotional state and our decision-making capacity. When we're grieving, when we're lonely, when we're anxious about the future, we need to recognize that we're temporarily more vulnerable to manipulation and poor choices. This doesn't mean we're weak or broken. It means we're human. But it does mean we need to be extra careful about major decisions during these periods, and we need to rely more heavily on our support systems. The women in that club had lost touch with these protective factors. They had isolated themselves from friends and family who might have questioned their choices. They had stopped consulting with professionals who could have given them objective advice. They had abandoned the activities and communities that had once given their lives meaning. They had created secret lives that required them to lie to the people who cared about them, and those lies had cut them off from the very support systems that could have saved them. But you don't have to follow that path. You can choose differently. You can choose to face your challenges with support rather than in isolation. You can choose to meet your needs in ways that enhance your life rather than diminish it. You can choose to become more integrated and authentic rather than more fragmented and secretive. The key is starting now, before you reach a crisis point. Don't wait until you're desperate to start building the support systems and coping skills that will protect you. Don't wait until you've made mistakes to start learning about the traps that are set for women like us. Don't wait until you've lost something precious to start valuing and protecting what you have. Because the truth is, the threats are real, and they're sophisticated, and they're specifically designed to exploit the challenges that we face as we age. But you're stronger and smarter than they expect you to be. You have more resources and more options than they want you to believe. And now you have information that can help you recognize and avoid their tactics before they can do any damage to your life. Tomorrow, I want to tell you about the 3 specific techniques I developed for recognizing when I'm about to make a decision from fear rather than wisdom, and how these simple practices have saved me from countless mistakes over the past year. Because the truth is, learning to protect yourself is just the beginning. The real journey is learning to create a life so rich and satisfying that you never want to escape from it again.